Well, hello, everybody. So grateful to be with us here at ULT San Diego for the Aquarian series. This evening's presentation is entitled Karma Yoga, and that will be given to us by Desiree Van Sanen.
So we begin, and before I start, I want to give special thanks to our San Diego crew, Jonathan, Monica, Truth, and also Maria for all their hard work putting these together. I know that it takes work, time, and dedication. I also want to share my appreciation for all those present and especially those presenters. Thank you because this is a learning process. I can tell you for myself, it's a learning process. The subjects that we pick up to present are not always, we're not experts in these subjects always, but we're pursuers in these subjects. And it's a great learning tool and valuable for both speaker, just as much as it may be for listeners. So thanks again. So karma yoga, we have first a hermetic statement, continuity of consciousness is the excuse me, is the result of continuity of striving rooted in knowledge of the laws of karma. I find in this statement one of the key words here is striving because it is an action word. And it really points to our destiny, our striving towards Svadharma. So I hope for all of us that we strive for this Svadharma, the true and eternal natures of each and all, and to remain to the best of our abilities constant in that sacred search for truth, for the sake of truth itself, and for the redemption of all sentient life. As we go through, we're going to talk about a few things. Karma yoga, we'll divide it up into what is karma and what is yoga before we go into the modifications of meditation, the arrows of Arjuna, the synthesis of the yogas, the gunas and their relationship to the yogas, the importance of vow taking, and some final words. But first, before we go into that, I thought it would be a nice icebreaker to tell a story, the banana peel story, which some of you have already heard. I don't know who originated it. I do know that I was told it by my own father back when I was a young teenager. The way he told it was very simple and to the point, and it only had 3 points. And so I have added to that story some context. So it is a lot longer than the way he told it to me. Not a whole lot longer, but it has a lot more context to it. And here we go. A man walks a long path, thinking solely of his daily errands. There's a banana peel lying in the way, but he doesn't see it, nor would it matter if he did. He has no experience with obstacles yet. He is innocent of experience. The banana peel goes unnoticed. The pendulum is static. No. The same man, in many past tense, sees the banana peel, but it is no special concern to him. It is nothing more than a curious object. He does not know yet of his hidden peril, but only takes note of its color, dimensions, and size. There is a slight influence in the pendulum, yet seemingly still. The next day, his paths await, as does the banana peel. Unaware of the hidden danger the obstacle holds, he steps upon its slippery surface and falls hard on the ground. He is stunned and suffers a wound that would pain him for days. He now is able to connect the object with the experience. and now begins to sense a slight dread of warning as he moves along the path. He learns to avoid the banana peels whenever he sees them. He has experienced the world of opposites. Slightly wiser now, he picks up the banana peels as he sees them and places them in the waste can, with only the concern to relieve himself of future anticipated suffering. The pendulum awakens and moves to its own coordinates. Having experienced the opposites, he now thinks of them often. In doing so, he now confronts a world of obstacles of all kinds. He not only sees banana peels, but other obstacles along the path: old bottles and cans, tires, plastic bags, refuse of all kinds. He begins to feel resentful as he struggles to clear his way down the ever-cluttered road. He frustratingly asks, why should I pick up the refuse of others? But seeing that others are also hurting themselves and now having a knowledge of the pain himself, he proceeds to do what he can, still with bitterness in his heart. His resentment turns to anger, and his anger to foolish pride. He begins to feel himself better than most others, for he is taking the time to do the work of others. He thinks to himself, good works should lead to better results. But good effects do not seem to come to him, but rather to others who have left the mess. He feels he is the leader of all men if only they would act in his place. But this does not happen either. The pendulum swings widely. But as the road progresses, so do the variety of obstacles ahead. There seems to be no end in sight. Banana peels of one kind or another lie in the streets. The daily task soon becomes too great. His willful pride turns to despondency. And as the pendulum swings, his agitation mounts, and his mind becomes shrouded in heavy darkness. But it is in this darkness and despair that the profoundest of questions are asked. He asks, why are not good results following my good acts? Why do the obstacles persist after all the work I have done? Why must I continue to suffer and suffer alone? What is life after all? And what am I? The questions persisted, growing in number and intensity. But within the darkness, an inner voice echoes, gentle like a breeze, yet firm as a beacon of love's light. It settles in him like a steady, unmovable sound. In its light, all anguish vanishes and clarity abounds. Still struggling with agitation, he takes refuge there often. In its ineffable light, he learns true kindness, true patience, and giving without concern for good results or worry of ill return. He spends his time in meditative prayer, living in its resonance. The sound flowing from his chest reveals answers in noetic tone. Although the answers seem veiled in poetic nuance, he knows his heart is at home there. And it is from this hearth that he learns the secrets of nature and the sacred methods of abiding by its movement and laws. He learns of the eternal journeyer and his many paths. He learns of the oneness of all sentient life, big and small, known and unknown. He learns to join the cause to the effect. They are one now. The pendulum's sway slows as its margins narrow, its destination marked by will. Today, as he moves along the ever-narrowing path, without ever breaking the link between him and his inner teacher, now fully absorbed in reverence, he dutifully removes the banana peels without a thought of them or memory of the deed performed. The pendulum has lost its sway, and thus the banana peel has performed its dharma. Thank you. Oops, let's go on first. So first, I want to talk a little bit about karma, and as I said, we'll also go into what is yoga. Karma is the universal law of action, and action, as we know, is perpetual. Movement is perpetual, and as long as there's movement, there will be law. It is the law of balance, always tending towards center, harmony, equilibrium. It is impersonal in the nth degree, like any other natural law, such as gravity. We do not say gravity is mine or yours, that it happens to be good gravity or bad gravity. And so neither should be attributed to karma. We are not the innocent objects of it, but the subject of it, as it applies to all self-motivative entities. Absolutely nothing occurs outside of this law. It includes all motivations, including thought, desire, volition. And it is defined by HBB as the ultimate law of the universe. There are three types of karma that we know of: sanchita, prarabdha, and kriyamana. So we have sanchita, which is like the storehouse of accumulated effects. So it's impossible to experience and endure all karma in one lifetime. Prarabdha is a collection of past sanchita karmas that are selected to be experienced through the present body. From sanchita karma, a slice of effects is reserved for any one lifetime. And kriyamana is that which is currently produced. And because we are currently producing and all the way up to our the moment that we leave this body, reincarnation is essential to that. So that's why they call it the twin doctrine, because one leads to the other. They are actually one doctrine if you in reality. Karma is the law of dispensation of energy. It is plastic in the sense that it is malleable, able to be stored, rearranged, portioned out, quickened, slowed, synthesized. Karma is energy in motion, always tending ultimately toward an equilibrious state. What is yoga? There were many definitions of yoga that I found. This one seemed to be most I guess, meaningful to me. Concentration on a singular point, question, or object to be considered. Though its methods may be traced to various schools that focus on one object or another, its practice generally relies on the avoidance of obstacles, deviations, or modifications of thought. These obstacles may take on many forms depending on the tendencies of the practitioner. So we look at modifications in this way, in that it is the personal sensation or effects that one experiences rather than the object itself. So one tries to restrain those sensations so that they can actually view the object of itself. Immanuel Kant was kind of I don't know, well ahead of his people, because he thought of this well in advance of the people in his community. Immanuel Kant focused on this very topic, the thing in itself, by stating, "We indeed, rightly considering objects of sense as mere appearances, confess thereby that they are based upon a thing in itself, though we know not this thing as it is in itself, but only know its appearance by way in which our senses are affected by this unknown something." So here again, we're dealing with the effect. And he asks us, in order to understand the thing in itself, we have to search for its noumena versus the phenomena. And also on a deeper level, to try to understand the dharma of that object or force or condition or situation. We ask ourselves, what does nature intend for this object? What action does it perform under law, aside from any personal effect we may experience from it? In the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali, Book 2, these modifications are dealt with to some degree. I have it listed here, but of course they go into it much more detailed. The obstacles in the way of him who desires to attain concentration are sickness, languor, doubt, carelessness, laziness, addiction to objects of sense, erroneous perception, failure to attain any stage of abstraction. This one's really important too. And inability in any stage when attained. An inability in any stage. I think it's the failure to reach any kind of steadiness. These obstacles are accompanied by grief, distress, trembling, and sighing. For the prevention of these, one truth should be dwelt upon. Any one accepted truth, which one approves, is here meant. Though the practicing of benevolence, tenderness, complacency, and disregard for objects of happiness, grief, virtue, and vice, the mind becomes purified. The student whose mind is thus steadied obtains a mastery that extends from the atomic to the infinite. And of course, here we're talking about the abstraction of that which is observed. The mind that has been so trained so that the ordinary modifications of its actions are not present, but only those that occur upon the conscious taking up of an object for contemplation is changed into the likeness of that which is pondered upon and enters into full comprehension of the being thereof. And William Quan Judge, in his commentary with regards to what was just read, indicates that the chief occasions for distraction of the mind are covetousness and aversion. And what the aphorism means is not that virtue and vice should be viewed with indifference by the student, but that he should not fix his mind with pleasure upon happiness or virtue, nor with aversion upon grief or vice in others, but should regard all with an equal mind. And the practice of benevolence, tenderness, and complacency brings about the cheerfulness of mind, which tends to strength and steadiness. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the arrows of Arjuna in relation to this striving. In the notes of the Bhagavad Gita by Judge, he writes that we enter upon the great path of action in occultism mentally disposed toward final victory. The mental attitude instantly throws all of the parts of our being into agitation, during which the tendencies, which are by nature antipathetic to each other, separate and range themselves upon opposite sides. This creates great distress, with oftentimes wanderings of the mind, and adds additional terror to our dark despair. This is the meaning of the flying of arrows. It is at this point that we are directed to examine our motives and desires, and that a spiritualized will ought to be cultivated. We find this kind of agitation also showing up in the voice of the silence in fragment 2, where it says, "The flame feels not the process of cleaning. The branches of a tree are shaken by the wind, but the trunk remains unmoved. Both action and inaction may find room in thee. thy body agitated, thy mind tranquil, thy soul is limpid as a mountain lake. When we think about our body being agitated, one might consider that the body is a innocent bystander of a kind, because it's been programmed by the mind to receive copious amounts of stimulation, oftentimes over many lifetimes. And so it too develops a certain need, desire, or is programmed to receive that stimulation. So even though the mind now has chosen to divert its attention away from stimulation and toward a higher meaning, toward truth, this pursuit of truth, that body is still lagging behind. So even though the mind is now in a state of reaching a point of equilibrium or tranquility, that body is still agitated. And so just knowing that it's an innocent thing, an innocent life, and not paying too much attention to that, but constantly focusing on those higher aspirations, the body in turn will follow, but it takes time. And we know this is true of people who have gone through trauma or long-term trauma, either from, a very, let's say, wartime, or even being in a very abusive relationship for a very long time, or people who have tended toward being utilizing certain feelings such as jealousy or anger. That body gets used to a certain level of adrenaline. And so we just want to be cautious of it and notice it, but not to be absorbed in it, to always stay focused on those higher aspirations. So now, finally, what is karma yoga? It is this is according to Judge again, concentration and contemplation while engaged in action. Karma yoga was introduced to the West primarily through the written Bhagavad Gita. It is through this sacred text wherein we explore the practices and methods that lead the aspirant toward liberation from attachment to the sensuous world of opposites or suffering. And this is done through and by selfless action with full attention given to divine universality, knowledge of the solidarity of all sentient life, detachment from the results of action, to serve others with beneficence without any consideration as to any benefit of self, surrendering all consequences to the law, full acceptance of one's dharma and the dharma of all sentient life, steadiness in concentration and contemplation while engaged in action. So these ideas are not necessarily start with the Gita. I'm sure these ideas were taught in many different schools, including the Tao Te Ching. And in Taoism, there's the way, the Wu Wei, which is the philosophy of non-doing or non-action or effortless action. Lao Tse tells us the highest virtue is to act without a sense of self. The highest kindness is to give without a condition. The highest justice is to see without preference. When the Tao is lost, one must learn the rules of virtue. When virtue is lost, the rules of kindness. When kindness is lost, the rules of justice. And when justice is lost, the rules of conduct. I think this is interesting because you can actually deconstruct it and work your way up if you need to. One notable difference between this and, of course, the Gita is that the Gita is presented as a story with a protagonist and all of the plots, and so we begin to identify with Arjuna as ourselves. But here, this is the teacher directly speaking to a student, so to speak. And much of the wisdom is given in terms of an allegory and sometimes often strange, conflicting ideas. So it asks the student to really contemplate and think about what's being presented. But the ideas are very much alike. So, as was stated, karma yoga is the path of selfless action performed for the benefit of all sentient beings without attachment to the fruits of one's actions. This action is often referred to as rightful action or duty. In Hinduism, this concept is known as seva, meaning selfless service. Karma yoga is one of the 4 classical schools of yoga, alongside jnana, the striving of spiritual knowledge or self-study, bhakti, the striving of devotion, and raja, the striving of concentration through meditative practices, each offering a path to moksha, or spiritual liberation, or self-realization. Raja Yoga is the continuity of meditation, and the regulation of mind is often considered, and the Raja Yoga is often considered a kind of evolution or synthesis of the 3. Since it's difficult to imagine meditation without action, since meditation is an action. In fact, there's much action in jnana as well, or without knowledge. Let's try to move this around. As all yogas in their essence are to reach a state of knowing something, and which imparts the devotional faith or bhakti. So I do see all of these yogas perhaps emphasizing something, but that in totality, they really represent one yoga when all of them are sort of synthesized. In the Gita, 2nd chapter, it is said that man who, casting off all desires, acts without attachment to results, free from egotism and selfishness, attains to tranquility. This is the condition of the Supreme Being, O son of Pritha. Having obtained this, one is not troubled, and remaining in it, even at the time of death, he passes on to extinction or union with the Supreme Spirit. And in chapter 5, to cease from works is well, and to do works in holiness is well, and both conduct to bliss supreme. But these the better way is his who, working piously, refraineth not. That is the true renouncer, firm and fixed, who, seeking not, rejecting not, dwells proof against the opposites. Effacement in the Supreme Spirit is gained by the right-seeing sage, whose sins are exhausted, who has put asunder all doubts, whose senses and organs are under control, and who is devoted to the well-being of all creatures. And I did wanted to just bold whose senses and organs are under control. It's another reference to the flying of the arrows. So we know as we move along this path, karma does become quickened, and because it's a great mathematician, it knows when to send what. At any rate, we talk about this quite often, but it is as we grow in this practice and study, it is becoming more and more aware of how this law functions in nature. Let's move to the next one. Okay. In the 14th chapter, the Gita, it is written, those who are alike in happiness and distress, who are established in the self, who look upon a clod, a stone, and a piece of gold as of equal value, remain the same amidst pleasant and unpleasant events, who are intelligent, who accept both blame and praise with equanimity, who remain the same in honor and dishonor, who treat both friend and foe alike, and who have abandoned all enterprises. They are said to have risen above the three gunas. Oops, let me go back. Missed a page here. Goes on to write or say that be thou free from these three qualities, repose upon eternal truth. But Judge, he clarifies something here. It is evident, he writes, at once that a higher sort of sattva is referred to in the words eternal truth. Sattva is the Sanskrit for truth and is not qualified when its place among the three qualities is given, so that when the disciple frees himself from this ordinary sattva, he is to take refuge in its eternal counterpart. Further, the instruction is not to renounce truth or either of the two qualities, but to remain freed for the influence or binding, or from, I should say, let me just read this again, but to remain freed from the influence or binding attachment force that any sort of quality has upon the human ego. He's telling us that there are many degrees. We have different degrees of sattva. We have different degrees of raja, tamas. And so I have to ask ourselves, since we have many degrees of these, perhaps dharmically they're operating for one or as one. It's like whenever I study something in its variations, whether it be number or colors or sounds or the astrological signs, anything that is expressed in many, I first try to center it on one thing, that they all are one. And then from there, try to work out their relationship, because they are all interrelated. And that interrelationship can be applied in many different ways. And so when I see the qualities, I see them operating as one quality first, and then try to understand how they're operating dharmically from that point forward. And that's all in an effort to not prejudge something based on my personal sense of something, but just to try to observe what it is doing. And so when we look at the gunas, these gunas are constantly present in all beings and interact at all times in varying degrees, and one generally predominating at any given moment. But their interactions are transitory. In essence, they are one and function in their triadic dharmic nature to serve the ego in its spiritual journey. Sattva, we know, is purity, harmony, balance, calm introspection. Raja is the ability to direct that energy. It's volition. It's, if you can imagine, you have a bandwidth that is almost incomprehensible with manas, but that is that ability, that rajic ability to be able to focus it through passion, through desire, and move it around. It's volition. And then tamas, interestingly enough, is also related to the Sanskrit, or is synonymous with the Sanskrit term. And I don't know if I'm saying this word right, but I'll give it a stab. Sthiti, and that means steady, to become steady. It also is associated with inertia. In fact, even be inertia. But interestingly enough, HPB talks about inertia. And she says inertia, so-called, is force, and for the students of esoteric sciences, the greatest of the occult forces. So it's an interesting thing that we look at, or begin to look at tamas not just negatively, because we're approaching it from its personal effect, but rather to try to understand what it is doing in nature to help to help with the process. I like to think of Thomas is kind of the habit former, because if the mind is directed in whatever direction over any given period of time, Thomas will ensure it stays there. It's kind of, it just keeps operating and ensures that it stays in that direction. But can you imagine what Thomas could do if that mind were directed in a spiritual way? Thomas will do the same. So when they talk about steadiness in that spiritual pursuit and being able to maintain that state of mind, we could say that Thomas is operating according to its dharma. That's just, one student's opinion to consider. Thanks. And because I see all things as being one, as I think most of us do, the yogas to me are all sort of one too, being expressed in different areas being predominant at any given time. Bhakti yoga, if we want to, we could look at it this way, that bhakti yoga could be related to Sattva or Siva, karma yoga being very much related to Brahma, and Jnana yoga, perhaps Vishnu, this constant questioning. Anyways, these could be synthesized into one Raja yoga, but it's just also something to think about, how we can take these different qualities or these different practices and actually see the way they are one. I'd like to talk a little bit about vows now, since our topic is karma yoga. In general, a vow is held to be sacred and voluntary, or to be a sacred and voluntary promise of devotion. This devotion can be to family, friend, community, nation, humanity, or an idea or ideal. However, socially and even religiously, we experience vows as conditional, a this for a that, made with the expectation that a promised act will bring about a desired result, generally for the petitioner. For example, Hannah, the mother of the judge Samuel in the Old Testament, vowed that she would devote herself to the service of Yahweh if he would grant her a son. So we can say conventionally, we display the vow via service, payment, even, or through religious sacrificial rites. Another example of a conditional vow is when I say, I promise to remove all alcohol from my life, except there'll be certain occasions when I need to do it because it's expected of me socially. Mahatma Gandhi says this is not the case for true vow taking. He says through him, we are reminded that true vows can only be taken on points of universal principles and not on dubious matters. They cannot be conditional. A vow means unflinching determination and helps us against temptation. Determination is worth nothing, if it bends before discomfort. A life without vows, he adds, is like a ship without anchor, or like an edifice that is built on slip sand instead of solid rock. A vow imparts stability, ballast, and firmness to one's character. What reliance can be placed on a person who lacks these essential qualities? When human beings bind themselves by the power of a vow, they seek to become wholly reliable. Faith is not a thing to grasp. It is a state to grow to And the fact is that perfection is attained through selfless and unconditional service. He goes on to add that the Himalayas are immovably fixed forever in their place. India would perish if the firmness of the Himalayas gave way. The sun, the moon, and the other heavenly bodies move with unerring regularity. Were it not so, human affairs would come to a standstill. But we know that the sun has been rising regularly at its fixed time for countless ages in the past and will continue to do so in the future. The cooling orb of the moon will continue always to wax and wane, as it has done for ages past, with clockwork regularity. That is why we call the sun and the moon to be witness to our affairs. We base our calendar on their movements. We regulate our time by their rising and setting. The same law which regulates these heavenly bodies applies equally to men. So I ask, can we, through the act of vows, become as reliable as the sun? And here we have the Kuan Yin pledge. This, for many theosophists, is a pledge that we wake up with, we go to sleep with, we post over our doorways. In any case, even if it's only once in a few months or so, we like to recite this as a reminder and to kind of recalibrate that heart from time to time. Never will I seek nor receive private individual salvation. Never will I enter into final peace alone, but forever and everywhere will I live and strive for the redemption of every creature throughout the world from the bonds of conditioned existence. I was wondering if I could get some volunteers out there to read our next 3 slides, and then we'll come to a close. I don't see.
I can do it.
Thank you.
That's Shobha. Okay. Voice of the Silence, Fragment 1. Kill out desire, but if thou killest it, take heed lest from the dead it should again arise. Kill love of life, but if thou slayest tanha, the will to live, let this not be for thirst of life eternal, but to replace the fleeting by the everlasting. Desire nothing. Chafe not at karma, nor at nature's changeless laws, but struggle only with the person, the transitory, the evanescent, and the perishable. Help nature and work on with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance. Just as the young seedling strives against all odds to reach the sun's rays, so too must each soul aspire and strive towards its highest and most noble inner self.
Thank you, Shobha.
Welcome.
Beautiful. And could someone else read this?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Okay. We should think constantly of our Svadharma and devote all our energies to it. We should have no thought for anything else. This is the touchstone of Svadharma. Karma Yoga is not action, which is great or weighty. The Karma Yoga of the Gita is something quite different. Its distinctive virtue consists in progressively acquiring Chittas Buddhi, inner purity, through performing without any thought of fruit of the Svadharma that comes to one naturally and inescapably. Endless activities go on all the time throughout creation. But karma yoga means performing all actions with a special mental attitude. To sow seed in a field and to scatter a handful of grain somewhere, these are entirely distinct actions. The difference between them is great, and we know how much we gain by sowing the need of what we lose by throwing it all away. The karma that the Gita teaches, like the sowing of seed, is like the sowing of seed. There is an unlimited power in carrying out one's duty, one's svadharma. Here, no effort can be too great. Here, there is no excuse for running around. Indian and human rights activist, Vinoba Bhave.
And this is our last slide. Monica, could you do me do the reading, please, if you don't mind?
When we attain to that universal life, which is the moral life, we become freed from bonds of pleasure and pain, and the place vacated by ourself becomes filled with an unspeakable joy, which springs from measureless love. In this state, the soul's activity is all the more heightened, only its motive power is not from desires, but in its own joy. This is the karma yoga of the Gita, the way to become one with the infinite activity by the exercise of the activity of disinterested goodness. Just as we find that the stronger the imagination, the less it is merely imaginary, and the more is it in harmony with truth. So we see the more vigorous our individuality, the more does it widen towards the universal. For the greatness of a personality is not in itself, but in its content, which is universal, just as the depth of a lake is judged not by the size of its cavity, but by the depth of its water.
Thank you so much. And this concludes, there's some citations there if anybody's interested.
Well, so wonderful, Desiree. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm sorry, I must have gone a little bit over, but we might have started a little late too.
Well, yeah, a little bumpy beginning, but no way we're not going to do questions. And
Okay, bumpy beginning, middle, end.
First up, Shobha.
Wow. I didn't know I was first. Anyway, Desiree, lovely presentation. My question is, I was very intrigued by your talking about sattva, rajas, and tamas as one. And because I've always felt, especially after reading the second chapter, right at the beginning, Sri Krishna says that go beyond the three qualities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he says, Nistrai Guno Bhav Arjuna. He says that. And then, of course, he explains all that later. But it's very interesting the way Krishna presents it in the 13th and the 14th chapter, where sattva is glorified and rajas and tamas are kind of not considered all that great. But I've always felt that they're just different aspects of the same, because sometimes tamas is needed, sometimes rajas is needed, and definitely sometimes sattva is needed. So, any comments?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because, you know, we read these things and we're always percolating about them. And it just seems to me, why would nature put it there? And I have to ask this question, and I have to be a little kid again, because I would always ask, why would God create a child to suffer and die, and then what? This merciful God. So to me, there has to be something that's logical, something that makes sense. There has to be a dharma to it. And that's where I have to look and see, well, what is it doing in nature? What is its job? And when I look at things like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva together as one, being expressed in triadically in nature, they must all be expressed triadically in nature. It needs to express it this way for balance. And I just like recently was viewing this in terms of the Trinity, Trimurti. And it just seemed to me, well, Brahma is it's an outward breathing, which is equivalent to the great to know, the compulsion to know in nature. Vishnu, what do we call that? We call it's almost like a stabilizing process, right? It persists. And then we have Shiva or Shiva, and this is a whole almost like a synthesis process that's happening here, because it's not only destroying, but it's recreating. And it's really one. It's a breath, but it's a triangulated breath. And it almost represents how we breathe, because we breathe out, we breathe in, and then there's a rest, right? We breathe like a triangle. We don't breathe like a circle. We breathe like a triangle. Otherwise, we'd be panting, right? And how does this, how can this be related? And I'm sorry, I live on a busy street, so they're not coming to take me away. It's just the way it is here. But this could possibly be overlapped or graphed onto the yogas as well. Now, it's just an idea, but I don't think it's a horrible idea. It might be workable that the yogas are in fact one yoga, but of different frequency, of different fidelities, so that they merge into one perfect Raja Yoga or a perfect Raja Yogi. But they all have to work together. Synthetically, they have to work together.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if I answered your question or
No,
maybe
you did.
too much.
Thank
I
you.
don't know.
Thank you so much.
You're sure welcome.
Yes.
Could I contribute? Excuse me. Could I contribute something on that?
Yes, please.
Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. Every individual person is like an atom, and the atom has got electron, proton, and neutron. Right? So we have, while we are during the day when we are active, working, doing everything, working here, going here, there, and there, we are in Rajasic. When we are meditating, we are in Sattvic. And we are sleeping, we are in Tamasic stage. So this is, I think, my research is not where that I read somewhere, but through my meditation, I came to say the 17th chapter of the Gita is all about this three gunas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how we behave every day, and are we active, hyperactive? That's like children. If you look at the boys and girls, when they are running around and they are very active, they are very hyper. That means it's a electron. That's electron. And then when you are neutral, that's neutron. And when you are inert, that's a proton.
Interesting observation.
Thank you,
I have to
Jitendra.
think about that tonight.
We have in the chat, I think in response to this, from Laura. Laura, why don't you read it? It's so beautiful. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Desiree. You tied a beautiful ribbon around Kama Yoga. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
It's wonderful to hear the comments in regards to the three gunas. You know, struggling to understand them and their importance in our evolution is, I think, key. It's almost like the motion itself. And I often think that the three qualities are, they repeat themselves every moment, every day, every year of our life.
Right.
And we go through all three of them, and they're essential. And in the Dream of Ravan, it says, through the anguish of the fire alone can the black coal of the mind become transmuted into light. And so the sorrow and anguish, which result inevitably from the passions and rajas, or the emotional life, constitute the purifying fire designed to purge away the dross of our titanic nature and transmute it into pure sattva, where purity, goodness, and truth are predominant. And then, you know, it says that even within tamas, there is the rajas and the sattva. And in rajas, there is tamas and sattva. And in sattva, there is that. And
They're inseparable.
yeah, and I think all of this is humanity's effort to raise up matter.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know what it was when I was a much younger person, and I hadn't been in too many theosophical classes at that point with my dad, but it just dawned on me. Oh, I told Mir, oh, so we're here to raise the matter. And it just seemed like a normal thing to say. Oh, kind of like, oh yeah, I remember now. We're here to raise the matter.
And we can't do it by ourselves. We need each other to help to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Diane.
Thank you, Laura. It's beautiful. Okay, so there's Diane, and then there's Nathan. Diane, do you want to?
Well, I'll try if I can get this idea out. First of all, I don't know if you know who I am. I'm Jonathan's mother, and I'm 90
You know
years
that.
old. Okay, I'm not sure everybody knows that. I'm 90 years old, and I don't say too much. But
Oh, well, yay!
I
My
thought
mother just turned 93 today, so
well, good.
hallelujah to you.
Well, I don't know if I'll make it or not, but you know, who knows? But the concept I have in my mind is this: is that we come with this great ideal of the Kuan Yin pledge, and it becomes more and more meaningful as we become older and wiser. It's too bad as teenagers when we're searching for our we don't know who the hell we are, you know.
Or care.
We're looking, we don't ever hear that idea. I'm sure it would spark a lot of minds in people if they had that idea out there, but it doesn't seem to be in our culture out there. And so we pass it by. And if we're lucky, we run into it later. I ran into it in the book, Key to Theosophy, but some people are luckier than others, or maybe our karma just draws us there. But we are living our lives, I think, in many times in preparation as to how to be able to fulfill this Kuan Yin pledge, because this doesn't this mean being part of the guardian wall? I'm wondering if we can bring in this idea of the guardian wall with the Kuan Yin pledge. And this is another ideal I carry around with me, but I'm wondering, how do we apply personally in our personalities, trying to get rid of them, of course, ignore them or stamp them out or whatever. But if we could only hold on to this idea of of being these, of living forever and ever for the benefit. We're never going to be just personalities and selfish people again. We never want to be, but we always forget. As in our culture, we forget because what do we do about that?
Oh, you're asking how do I?
Oh, it torments me because I want to know, how do we make this idea of the Kuan Yin Pledge available to teenagers?
Oh,
I remember reading something wonderful about occultism, and it said that repetition is necessary for occultism. So it seems that maybe we have to just keep repeating each incarnation, and we become more aware.
Mm-hmm.
and that would be Thomas, wouldn't it? The
Yeah.
inertia. So, but it takes the mind to constantly look for truth, to quest it. It has to quest. And they could talk about that dauntless quest for truth.
Striving, as you said.
Yes, striving is such an important part of this whole action because we're going to fall a lot. We know that. But that striving keeps us always going back home, always going back to center. We know where our heart feels in its natural spot. We know that. And we know that these teachings are in alignment with that noetic tone. So it's always striving to understand and for truth for the sake of truth itself. I always say, don't strive just to be smart. That's worthless. Strive for the sake of truth itself. Revere truth. And don't worry about consequences here, because the actor is learning to be the action, if that makes sense. It's merging in with the action. The perceiver becomes the perceived. So that's when that action becomes so integrated into that soul seeker that it only knows that action. It might perform lots of actions on the outside that benefit others, but it's not thinking, I'm benefiting others. Woohoo. It's not thinking that, because it's become that action itself. It's become the path itself.
Gorgeous. I would like to make one comment about the guardian wall. I think that I was given to understand that the guardian wall is the totality of every spiritual master, whatever degree their attainment, which it has a decided flow into the universe. And because of their attainment and their ability to sustain that, it creates a protection around mankind without which we would have gone down long ago.
Wow.
And so I'm also, if I understand correctly, thinking that all of us, with our striving on this path, form this externalized reality of truth about the masters of wisdom and their the sustaining us in a way that is perhaps a little bit more direct, depending on how we anchor ourselves in these truths and continue to seek to purify our being so that we can, over how many incarnations, who knows, accomplish in the way that they do. So there's always the outpost and of course the wall itself, and the work is to keep that link purified and clear so that whatever segment of humanity has not had that question mark happen to them at some point in their evolution, when they do, they'll have a whole community, a sangam that is ready to aid and help them with this divine intelligence and love. So I just wanted to respond to what Diane Martin was saying, because Tina, and the other thing, it would seem that looking at the teenage, they are so obsessed with technology. And
Mm.
so the response to that, it would seem, is to get obsessive about what they're obsessive about and flow some energy into it. So just a thought.
Thank you. Thanks, Monica. It's a
Thank
great
you.
observation. Okay, I know Nathan's been sitting there for a while with his hand up. Good thing it's not a physical hand.
Yeah. So, the thing about our teenagers is they are watching us. So, and it may be that, it seems like they're not paying attention, but we have an opportunity to, we just keep on showing up, and it may not hit them now, but like any of us, 10 years, 20 years later, something that we say, it's not that long, really. I know they look like teenagers, but any minute now they're going to be our age and ready for whatever seeds were planted. So let's see. Oh, I wanted to talk about, I just love the stories you told. Thank you so much, Desiree.
Welcome.
And this whole idea about karma being, or good gravity and bad gravity. I love that. And but I also, you made that mention, which I think is from Gandhi and the Ethics of Vow Taking, where he talking about the heavenly bodies.
Mhm.
And with the eclipse coming up here in a couple of days, which is such a wonderful opportunity, not often do we have the moon come in front of the sun, in such a way that we're able to, focus on the blockages in our yang energy, but this is happening. And if we can just, if we can get our yang energy in line with our yin energy for one time, that's a good thing. But, these heavenly bodies, they move with this unerring regularity, he says. And I'm just reminded of, there's this concept from the some German social researchers, they call it Zeitgebers, which is like time givers. And, certainly with our circadian rhythms, the times that we wake up and the times that we go to sleep, those are Zeitgebers. They keep us, we become entrained in a similar way that, the gunas work, like whatever, habits that we develop, it's in relationship to our social surroundings. There are social Zeitgebers, and then there are also these, astronomical Zeitgebers.
Timekeepers.
Yeah, timekeepers, time givers, timekeepers. So, I think that this is the thing, like, to go back to Diane's question about what do we do, there is this, we keep trying, and then gradually through that heating up process of the karmic, the arrows on either side, we kind of lose our addiction a little bit to things being the way that they were before. Because we things start heating up, the arrows start flying. We think, oh, well, wait, what was I thinking? Let me just go back to, to safety, to comfort, to not striving. And, this is going to happen. It's going to be up and down in our lives. But the more that we realize that this is, that we just have to keep at it, the better. I think that's all I had to say. But thank you so much. I just really appreciate your bringing us to, the law of nature of this and the relationship with the heavenly bodies. And Gandhi talked about vows in terms of the sun and the moon.
Mhm.
This is like so fundamental to our humanity. We have an opportunity every day. The sun comes up, and, a certain amount of time, the sun will go down. And if we can, harmonize ourselves with these daily rhythms, but that if we don't get it right one day, well, you know what? This is what the Pythagorean review is for. Well, then the next day, let's see if we can just get that timing down just a little bit better. And when we're in tune with nature like that, then it doesn't take so much effort, and we can withstand the storm, because it's not us that's doing it. We're attuned to all of these heavenly bodies. We're attuned perhaps with a community of seekers, people who give us strength, because we know we're not in this on our own. We become attuned with the great masters of wisdom. Like, we are literally not alone.
And when I read Gandhi's treatise on vow taking, I'm reminded of our accountability, my accountability to others. We have a lot of souls walking around that only feel accountable to themselves, and even in that, not very well, not in their own, even in their own best interests. It's important, I think, above all, to remember our accountability to each other, to animals, to this planet, and never ever separate that link that binds all sentient life. It made me feel I need to be accountable for my actions, even if I think for a moment they don't affect other people. It's just my own little zoo going on in here. No, it does affect other people. So I think what happens is one's sense of responsibility becomes more, has more fidelity over time, has more meaning. That sense of accountability to others and oneself. Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. I don't know if Judy's got her hand up from before, or Laura's got her hand up from before. I don't know if they're still up or if they're.
Yes, Judy?
Did you have a question or comment, Judy?
Yes, if I could comment and question. I noticed when you brought the slide up about Lao Tzu, he said that we must act without self-involvement. This is a paraphrase, and the universality of this is so profound because I saw it in your slides on the Bhagavad Gita: suspend the results of your action, suspend personal desires. And Vinoba Bobby also talks about the same thing, I think, when he talks about Swadharma, we do our duty. But isn't it the case that it's impossible not to desire? But we're talking about the level of desire here. If we desire nothing for our personal self, that we can act for truth alone, as you were saying, and we're acting without involvement in the personal self. Like when I was teaching, some people got up and said, "Oh, it's so important to get the Distinguished Teacher Award." And I thought, am I teaching so that students may learn, or may I be teaching so I can get this award? Well, frankly, I didn't want the company of some of those who had won that award, because they were clearly playing to the gallery. So I wondered if you could comment on the universality of this, that we suspend the lower self, really the lower manas, but
Right.
not a higher desire for the good and truth.
Yeah, I think the Gita pretty much explains it well, because it has to do with our attachment to things. But let's really look and see what we're getting attached to here, because we don't get attached to things. We get attached to the stimulation we receive from things. I think it's important to make that distinction, because if we did not have the stimulation that we get from having that shiny new car, or from that nice suit, or whatever the case may be. We wouldn't aspire to it. We would not gravitate toward it. So what we're working on, hopefully, is to minimize, to rein in the stimulation of it. And when you rein in the stimulation, then you can start to see that object you're meditating on. So that's why, I'm such a fan of Immanuel Kant, because he's really cluing us into what we're supposed to be looking at, so that we're not just looking at something with, and then the lens that we're looking through is all filled with emotions and what I like and what I don't like. No, you have to clean that lens. All those emotions have to disappear. And yes, we do. I have, every time I get a deadline, my heart goes, just a little bit. And then I have to rein it in, because I can't do my job if I'm just thinking about adrenaline in my system. But this is true when we look at anything. That energy has to get put in its place. It has to be not removed. It has to be tamed. You can't destroy energy. It just has to change. It has to be tamed. And then we can start to see things as they are. And then beyond that, how they perform dharmically. So again, we don't get attached to things. We get attached to the stimulations we experience from them. And if you don't believe me, imagine yourself without that stimulation and see if your attitude toward that thing changes.
Well, Laura.
Okay, I don't know who held their hand up first, if it was
Okay.
Laura or Maluka, but
Well, you've all been saying it, that without self-involvement, without the need for sensation, we stand between nature and the Nirmanakayas and the Adepts and the Mahatmas. And that's an important position. And I wonder that karma yoga is that right performance of duty that Judy mentioned, that rather than thinking about what can nature give us or what can the Mahatmas give us, we can think, what can we give them? What is that we're to give to the beings below us in awareness? And what is it that we are to give to the Nirmanakayas?
and what's our accountability to all
Yeah,
of
you
you?
mentioned that. Yeah, the accountability. Yeah.
What was I supposed to?
No, just thank you again.
Just-
That's just so, everyone sort of summed it up beautifully, without
Yeah.
self-involvement, accountability, which I think is an important part of karma yoga,
Mhm.
that you mentioned. That we are accountable to the kingdoms below us, and we're accountable to the kingdoms above, or the beings above us in awareness too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have an accountability, even with these teachings of theosophy, we have to do something with them. We can't just study it for our own benefit. We have to put these ideas to work.
Thank you, Laura. Maluka, is your virtual hand getting tired?
No, I'm learning patience, and you taught me that. I love very much what you bring into these presentations, and you really inspire with your piece.
Thank you.
And it took a lot of thought to put it together, so thank you for that, my sister. I would like to say that several things came to mind. You mentioned the arrows, and the arrows, it has so many different meanings. I remember William Q. Judge, practice archery, hit the mark. I was thinking, I got all these kind of different ideas, but they also talk about arrows that we send to each other, like evil eye, And the shamans, they actually perceive when a person have been a victim of those envy, those bad arrows, and they actually have a way to pull them out, because they say at some point we maybe feel an achy heart, and it's because maybe something, we open ourselves to that, or somebody just did something, which I just have all kind of different ideas about that. And I know that we have to hit the mark as far as what we do with our actions and thoughts and so on, for the good of humanity and everybody else. Then, on behalf of the young children, I'm surrounded by a lot of young children. I have my children are young, and they're surrounded by a lot of young people. And for your surprise, all of them practice yoga.
Oh, wow.
If it's physical. They are Aquarian. This is Aquarian. Remember, this is Aquarian area, and they're very mind oriented. They're not very attached to things, and they have a community among themselves. My daughter, when she gave birth to her child, I made a happy grandma, she was surrounded by gift and help from all over. Her whole street brought her stuff, like baby Jesus was born, And it's just amazing, all ages, and they have something very special, this new generation, and I feel so happy that they are that way, and they help each other. They're not envy, they're not competing. They had this sisterly and brotherly among themselves, and always willing to help whoever need help. And I have to say that, yes, these new people who are coming into this world, these new souls, are more advanced than we are by far. And they are, like I say, less attached to this material. Yeah, technology is there, but it's all depends how you use it. Not everybody, is just there day and night with the telephone or the internet. If you use it with balance, I think it's quite helpful. And as far as the eclipses, eclipses have a long history of hurting or helping humanity. Actually,
Excuse me.
yes, the Athens lost their dominion over other places because they were afraid of the sun eclipse, so they lost the battle. But it also helped other countries that, if they're superstitious, I hope that the people who are in war right now believe in this. They stop the war and bring truth and peace to many countries, because this is the time in that they fear, and they have to look up and say there is a power here that is greater than ours.
Reverence.
Yeah, in 2017, there was the new change of scepter, in our politics. And so let's hope that this sun eclipse will bring the peace, I hope, to all of
us.
Exactly. But and they say that the different thing between the 2017 and now is that now it's going to come closer and touching more of the areas of the United States. And I don't know what that will mean. They have millions of people going to Texas just to watch it. And this is one of the times that make sure to say I'm powerful, and here you have to look up to me, It's what I take out of it. But we see what it will bring. And like I said, this is a wonderful talk that it will sort of maybe help us to put ourselves more center. And I hope that we continue to have brotherly and sisterly thoughts to each one of us, because we are one, as Plotinus said. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you.
So beautiful. Okay, you had a few comments in the chat section from Lizette. Thank you, Desiree. This was a beautiful and very inspirational talk. We heard from Laura. She gave us the honors. Kurt Grading says, Thank you, Desiree, to everyone. Laura, Kelly, thank you. Wonderful presentation. And Judy Salzman, thank you, Desiree. Profound presentation.
Thank everyone out there, and hope to see everybody next Sunday. I'm looking forward to it. Shobha.
Yes. Next week, the title of the presentation is Rama and Sita,
Yep.
and Arun Shobha Sharma will be presenting. So we hope you'll come back and be with us.
Mhm.
Yes, there she is. Okay, everybody.
Everyone have a great evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.